Hello and welcome to Neuro Way podcast with Autistic Aar. This is the podcast that deep dives into the world of all things about the life of being neurodivergent, diving into the diverse experiences of life of being a neurodivergent person, speaking to those who fall under the umbrella of neurodivergent neurotypes from ADHD and autism, dyslexia and dyspraxia, to OCD and dissociative identity disorder, and all other neurodivergent neurotypes under the ring. With my guests, we explore the intersections of neurodivergency in our identity, culture, and everyday life, with a mix of personal and educational insights, guest conversations with no issue off the table. For conversation, me and my guests seek to provide an insightful and accurate picture of neurodivergent life, to educate divergent people, to make sense of their neurodivergent differences, and those who wish to learn and understand what it truly means. I hope to empathy by supporting a positive conversation driven on compassion about making this podcast to be a change making podcast for those listening and learning about neurodivergency. The Neuro Rainbow cast and the Neuro Rainbow project is an inclusive, safe space for discussion, advocacy and celebration of the neurodivergent experience and exploring how we can unmask. I'm your host, Aar Jae Williams, and on this edition of the Neuro Rainbow Cast podcast, my guest is Dan Bird. If you're a fan of reality TV and one of the many millions of rotating series of the Traitors UK, might be already familiar with Dan Bird, bank risk manager, and for those of you who watch, you will remember he's mentioned that he himself is autistic. To my memory and knowledge, Dan is the only contestant here in the United Kingdom and in all the international formats of the programme The Traitors that is openly autistic, and is the first openly autistic contestant I remember seeing on the programme as watching it. You might not know about the Traitors. This was see contestants for psychologically reality competition mixing games, so reality television. The contestants work together on a set of challenges to add and build money to a prize pot that with the most anyone can take with them at the end of the series is £120,000, which is a life-changing sum of money. But among the players, there are hidden traitors, secretly working to eliminate the faithful players who have a chance to steal the prize for themselves in the finale. The show involves the most dramatic and intense game of psychological experiment on television, being centred around the round table. Players debate and vote of who to banish from the game on the basis of who they suspect is a traitor, and only then, by the popular vote around the round table, do the contestants get to find out if the person is a traitor or if they are a thief. The show is set in a picturesque Scottish castle. The show thrives on deception, alliances, and psychological warfare, making it an intense and gripping watch. The Traitors aired in the United Kingdom in January 2020. That is season 3, aired on BBC One and BBC iPlayer, which for viewers in the United Kingdom you can still catch on BBC iPlayer or you can watch it in the US on Peacock. and other streaming services. Find out more online. For any international listeners or British people who haven't seen the series of the Traitors, but wish to do so, this interview will contain spoilers to season 3 of the British version of the Traitors. You have been warned. But beyond this, beyond his television fame, Dan has offered a travel guide for neurodivergent travellers titled Go. In it, the synopsis of the episode, and on www.neurorainbowproject.com/neuro Neuro you will be able to find details of how to purchase Dan's books, which has been read by many of the cast of that series of The Traitors and been a quite a popular read, and something that I will be discussing later on in this interview. Sit back, relax, and enjoy and join us for an enlightened, engaging conversation with Dan from The Traitors. Thank you very much and hope you enjoy.
My name's Dan. I recently appeared on season 3 of The Traitors UK. The other thing that's interesting that might be of interest to this podcast is I released a book last year about neurodiverse travel called Go Neuro Way.
Can you tell me further more about yourself as with Go Neuro Way? It's hence that you are new. Tell me about your new and how you got diagnosed as being autistic.
I was diagnosed in my mid-20s, and it came as a result of lots of different experiences for me. I had anxiety quite a bit in my teen years and in my early 20s. And I underwent a couple of different things to combat the anxiety, but none of it really ever seemed to get to the main thing that was driving that anxiety. On top of that, I've heard a lot of different things about different experiences that people had who had autism in terms of sensory difficulties. So I've always been extremely sensitive to noises, to smells, to textures, etc. A couple of things to do with socializing as well, and routines, and sticking to routines quite rigidly. So all of those things, the more I found out about autism, the more I thought this actually describes my experience quite accurately. So I had a conversation with a doctor for about 4 hours, and by the end of that conversation, he said, "Yeah, I think you are autistic."
What was the things that you know your doctor noticed that the things have been autistic?
A lot of the sensory triggers were things that he picked out. The fact that I was extremely sensitive compared to the average person when it came to noises, especially more subtle noises as well. Things like the ticking of a clock, for example, is something which is quite bothersome to me. But yeah, generally just extreme sensitivities when it comes to that. Lights, textures, smells as well. All of those can sometimes be quite difficult for me. And then challenges when it comes to socializing as well. So socializing in quite a rigid, structured way, and then not liking if routines get disrupted at all. I can find that really difficult. So they were some of the other triggers that were picked out by that person.
Can you explore about more the socializing? Because I know this part of the thing is why I want to talk about the traitors as because I know the traitors been a reality show, but also being a game show that I know it can be quite highly emotional and something that takes a lot of social energy out of. So what were your social challenges, would you say?
In the game, I would say I'm not used to socializing with lots of people in my day-to-day life. So being surrounded by lots of people was definitely something I had to adjust to quickly. And I'm not interested in small talk a lot. I found that a little bit difficult as well when people were just having general chit chat. I'd be like, I'm not interested in this. Let's talk about the game again. Because the game elements of things were really exciting to me. Just being strategic and talking about what moves we were going to make. I was really passionate about that. But yeah, when it came to this sort of just chilling out and having a bit of social time, that wasn't something which interested me too much in the game.
So going a bit further back onto more linking to autism and also the traitors, what made you apply for the treat?
I've always been massively passionate about strategy reality TV shows. And I think, again, this is probably linked to the autism because from what I've heard from a lot of other autistic people, a lot of us tend to have extreme interests that we get quite hyper fixated on. And reality TV is definitely one of those for me. I've always loved things like Survivor or even sometimes Big Brother or Traitors. So it was always a dream of mine to be able to take part in one myself and to just have an opportunity to play a really cutthroat strategic game.
And is it like, so it's what, as you said, it's something that was like a focus interest of yourself and what that made you want to go on it. But as you said, like you had grown up and in your early 20s, just had those like struggles with socializing and like you were diagnosed later on in your 20s and as you said, you had to navigate a lot of things. So how did you find the confidence or and gives like the strength enough to think about applying for because it can be reality TV can be quite challenging for anyone with neurodivergent condition or any other disability like that.
Yeah, so I think for me, getting my diagnosis was massively beneficial to me because it helped me answer a lot of the questions that I had about myself. It put a stop to all the worries that I had about not being as good as other people socially or feeling anxious because I just thought there are some things outside of my control. I don't have to fight so hard against it anymore. And when it came to the game itself, I brought that level of relaxedness and confidence about myself into the game as well. I thought the only way I'm going to be able to play this game is as myself authentically. And I was very lucky in that we had a lot of really diverse people as part of our cast, people who have brought different experiences to the game. There were lots of other neurodiverse people on the cast as well, which was really nice. People who had disabilities who talked about those disabilities on the show, people who came from completely different backgrounds, whether it was from a race perspective, a sexual orientation perspective, just where they grew up in the UK. It was a very nice, diverse mix. So it felt very respectful and that everybody wanted to learn about each other's own experiences.
That's the thing, as you said, you do. You're not one for small talk and that conversation, but as I said, some of the stuff that might not, you might not be interested in some of that aspects of it. But I suppose away from the game, it was an interest to get to know people on a deeper level within it, so and like a deeper level to what you might see on TV.
I think it's such an intense game, and you're spending quite a lot of time with the people in the game. So you talk to them a lot during the day about strategy, but also at times about each other's lives as well. So you do develop really connections with people because we all had that experience together. We all shared really intense bonding experience together.
I know we can't talk a bit too much about the behind the scenes stuff, but I guess it's one of those things. I think as viewers and somebody yourself who's watched reality TV a lot throughout your life, it's something that as viewers we can often forget that we are seeing in bits of a clip of the day of the show, and because from you with the reality show you might be filming from when you're waking up to before you go into sleep, and it's that thing that we only get to see a snapshot of that, and I guess it's just something that when you're watching it back, there might have been other interesting conversations and interesting things that might have happened in a day that might tell people about it. Because as well as viewers, sometimes there can be the thing that you get to know people on a deeper level, but we often all only see certain political or entertainment moments of the day.
Definitely, yeah. And I was quite lucky because I felt like on the show, a lot of my important relationships were shown in the show. So there were moments of me with me and Mina, for example. There were moments with me and Cass, me and Frankie. I spoke in episode one about the fact that I wasn't happy that Yin went. And these were all some of the people who I had developed the strongest relationships with when I was in the game. So I was really happy that they were all shown.
Yeah, and it's like when it's glad to be shown as well, and as a viewer, like sometimes those moments where you think, oh, as well as yourself, you be watching people go without in the competition, and you can wish they stuck out for longer in the competition because you can tell that they will be great people to watch on a television and a game show. But I was also navigating between, as you said, we got close to many people. Mina, Cass, we went out quite early on in the game of what we saw seen on TV, and the round table of what as viewers seen is reason why people were suspecting him as a traitor wasn't down to his occupation, but what was it also dealing with also your emotions and like the strategy of the game, and but also like the emotions of other people and how they might be prejudging people as traitors.
It's such a difficult game to play because, for the most part, you have nothing to go off of, and everybody's clutching at straws. We were all just sort of trying our best to find the traitors, but a lot of the logic that we all used, including myself, was it just didn't obviously add up to us getting a traitor out in those moments. So it's a really difficult game to play, and on top of that, we don't know each other, so we don't know if a person is behaving as they normally would. You can make a guess and say, oh, maybe that seems suspicious, but you don't know that person at all and they don't know you. So you could, and people went into the game pretending to be a character or hiding parts of themselves. Even from day one, you're not getting a fully authentic version of all of the people that you're playing with. So it's very difficult. You don't have a lot to go off of.
And oh, I know it's something that autistic people often have that thing of where we mask our traits and being later diagnosed yourself. And probably it's something that you talked about in your book, Go Neuro Way, which I'm going to talk about in a short bit, is that it's that thing of where we often find ourselves masking. And as you said, not many people are being authentic in themselves because that's the game. And it's a thing of where you have to overanalyze people's behaviours and look out for signs of. Is there something that maybe your experience as masking your autism and like your how you had to learn to read people's emotions and social cues, that did you think that might help you within a game?
Ironically, I felt like I was able to be myself 100% during the game, and I have masked in the past. But in the game itself, I was a faithful, and I told several cast members about my autism quite early on. So I always felt comfortable and free to play the game that I wanted to, even if it got me into trouble at times. I played it strategically, and people knew that was how I was playing it. People knew that I was going to be competitive and that I was going to be self-interested. So I don't feel like I ever had to hide anything because I was a faithful and I was being myself, and I didn't feel like I was masking at all.
The questions I want to ask you as well. What, like, would it cross your mind when you were playing the game and maybe what you'd be thinking when you go to bed on the programme? And you might be thinking, if I was selected as a traitor, how would you think you would have played the game?
I think it would have been very interesting because I wanted to have as much control over the game as possible, and I tried to be as active as a faithful as I possibly could be, and as self-interested. I think if I was a traitor, I would have that control behind the scenes, so I wouldn't need to be as actively and obviously self-interested and active in the game. So I think I would have been a good traitor. I think because it would have allowed me to channel my game instincts in a way that wouldn't draw as much attention, if that makes sense.
Do you think it was an easy thing to disclose to your fellow cast members that you were autistic?
I was a little bit nervous about it at first, but it seemed like it was the right thing to do in the game. It just felt relevant in that moment, and people were very nice and just there were a lot of shared experiences with people, but with either people that they themselves knew in their family or friend groups who were either autistic or neurodivergent. So there was a lot of empathy that came from the group.
Because I know Alexander from the game, like one thing he wanted to talk about was how he donated some of the money to a charity that helped his brother as he opened up in the game who was autistic. And another thing I want to ask you about is if you were to have run that money, what would you done with the money if you won the game?
Oh, I don't know, to be honest, because my motivation was always to play the game. So I wasn't really ever thinking about the end goal or the money because I just wanted to play hard every single day that I was there. So I didn't really give it too much thought. But I imagine probably I love traveling, which is why I wrote my book. So probably more travel and spending more time with family and friends abroad, probably.
Back to the point of like when we talk about like how it's been on the game with being autistic, and we can't obviously talk too much about behind the scenes, but I'm sure that you'll be able to say about maybe how inclusive, accessible it was as so for being neurodivergent, because I think for maybe anyone who like is autistic and neurodivergent listening who has ever thought of playing for reality show, even like the traitors themselves, what things would you think would be good for them to know about, and how, as much as you can say, was the inclusiveness on the show?
Definitely. I always felt supported by the whole team. And if there were times when I felt a little bit burnt or just like I needed a full break, that option was always available. There was always a place for me to go to just decompress, or somebody would, I would be allowed to go outside and just have a bit of a chill by myself for a while. And that was understood by both the cast and the crew. I'm quite confident in talking about what I need because even before my diagnosis, I knew what things were difficult for me. So I was just able to talk about them. Even if I didn't have an explanation for why those things were difficult at that point, I always felt confident in saying what I needed on the show, which was nice.
Yeah. And I think that, like, from between, like, I think series one to now series three, I think there has been like a more visible on screen difference with, the cast, how like people report it, because I at least remember from season one with Aaron, there was a heated moment around the round table when I had ADHD, and it's something that where I think because maybe some of the cast members were picking up on his neurodivergent traits and behaviour and kind of like approaches it in an aggressive manner, and it's something that where he had to leave the table just to regulate himself. So I think on screen as well, from what viewers may seen, it seems that there's a lot more understanding and empathy from like the cast as well as.
Yeah, 100%. It always felt like a really inclusive, supportive environment. If there were specific things that people needed, it felt like everybody understood why and everybody would support you.
What from playing the game you wanted to be able to do it, from be able to play it as a game and see how good you are and play through the strategy, and that's how your mind works for it. But what are the things that you were able to get from the going on the show that you might have not expected from going on the show?
I think it was a fantastic learning experience for me because I've taken a lot of things from the show and I'm trying to apply that to my day-to-day life now because I think the areas in which I fell down on the show are probably areas that I've struggled with before that in terms of maybe overthinking a little bit. I think I overthought myself out of the game in those last couple of days. And I also trying to cram too much in. It's something that I do in my day-to-day life. I just want to be a part of every opportunity and you obviously have to focus and you have to choose the things that you want to pursue. And I think in the game I did that as well. I just wanted to make the most of every challenge, every mission, every strategic conversation, every round table. I could have paced myself a little bit better. So that's a really big lesson that I've taken from the show as well, is just to not try and do it all and just focus on the things that are really important.
One thing from when I was talking to somebody who's interviewed people from the Traitors before, Mason, who does another Neurodivergent podcast, he was saying that one good thing to ask would be about the first challenge you had with the boat. And one thing is like how people were perceiving the self-interest aspect of it and how to play on a team as well. How was also from navigating those challenges itself.
I think I saw the game in a very black and white way, and I just thought it makes sense logically for me to behave self-interestedly in the game, and I'm not going to hide that fact. And I was probably playing quite an emotionless game as well at times because I just saw things as the optimal move for me to make in certain situations. I never wanted to leave myself vulnerable for murder, and I just wanted to always be making the self-interested good moves to make. But I think that I didn't fully comprehend the impact that might have on those around me because I was very open about my strategy. It didn't come across as that I was a team player at times. And at the time, I wasn't really bothered. I thought we're not all going to get to the end of this game and win, so I don't really care if people think I'm a team player or not. But I think I could have played it with a bit more skill in terms of hiding my intentions at times because I never did that. I was very open about what my strategy was.
Yeah, and that can be like a favorite thing with the game is how open you are to be with your strategy, because it's like everyone's got their own game that they play, and that's where sometimes that overthinking in the game. If you were to play again, would you feel I would be even more team player, be less open with game strategy?
So difficult because I think that if there ever was to be another season, then prior perceptions would probably play a big part of that. And we obviously all played the game a particular way the time that we've all played. So if anybody were to change up their strategy too much, I think people would question that. And obviously, if you were a faithful first time and you're acting differently a second time, they'd be like, oh, is he acting differently because he's a traitor? But we would all have to play a different game to the one that we played because for the majority of us, our previous games did not work. So if there ever is another opportunity to play a game like this, I think I would have to change up my strategy. But I think I'd have to be mindful of the fact that everybody would be suspicious of people changing their strategy.
I know that when you posted about this interview on social media, you got good relationship after the show with so many different people from the cast. And since the show was finished, what's the relationships you've been able to make from the show, and how have you all been able to keep in touch?
The whole group has stayed in touch since the show finished filming, and there's a really strong bond between everybody. There's no hard feelings between anybody in the group, so it has been really nice. We have kept those relationships.
What has it been like watching it back with people, your friends and family, and as the episodes were going out in January, and all the things that you've been telling from watching it themselves?
It was interesting. All of my friends and family, without fail, they all said you were 100% you on the show, and said they expected me to play the game exactly how I did play it, and that I was myself. So that's been really nice because it's shown to me that I was right in the fact that I felt comfortable when I was there, and that came across on screen. And they all said, "Yep, that's Dan. No question of doubt. That is how Dan would play the game." And they were already proud of me, which was nice.
How was it when you're like thinking about looking maybe on social media and reading a public reaction from the series?
It was great. I think for the most part, I got really nice comments online about my game. So the reaction has been really positive, and it's really hard putting you like for any of us putting ourselves out there on a show like this because you don't know what reaction you're going to
Yeah.
get. But it was just its own compartmentalized game, and we're all bigger than the person that we were in the game. We've all got so many aspects to ourselves, so it has been really difficult. But for me personally, the reaction was mostly positive.
Yeah, because it's like amusingly, it was quite something when so many people were reacting so positively to like how Linda played the game. And one thing I found was quite amusing with how Linda was saying about her gameplay on TV, radio, social media, whatever, and also when she was on the Uncloaked podcast. She was I thought I played the game absolutely terrible. Her sense of honesty with how she was playing the game and all that. And you know what? I think that like there was, as you said, so many positive characters, and there was a lot of positive things being said, and I can see as a viewer that you all got along, and that was quite good.
Definitely. And I spoke to Linda when the show was airing because she did say she was worried she was going to come across badly. But I said, Linda, you were great socially at the game as well. Like in every episode, more or less, there is a shot of Linda giving somebody a hug or consoling somebody when they were feeling upset. And I said to her, Linda, that's amazing strategy. You were always there making people feel good. And sometimes you want to play the game as logically as you can, but sometimes emotions do come into it, and instinctively you don't want to go for somebody who is protecting you like that.
Yeah, and I think for Linda as well, from probably all with the viewers, it's like it got warm to her because she got a good sense of humour, with how she was, very entertaining player as well. And back to the motions of it, and in terms like some of the tasks where you've been enclosed spaces or whatever, or like you also have some of the tasks before where you got to the field stuff. And like last year on, they had like people with like the coffins and all that stuff. So also seeing all kind of the dark elements. So was that something that might have been a concern for you when you was going on the show, or how did you? Was there anything that going on the show you was like afraid of in terms of the cast, or in not the cast, but in terms of the challenges?
I really enjoyed the missions in our game. Previously, when I've watched other versions of the Traitors, the missions have not always been the thing that I thought I would enjoy, because I thought I would enjoy the round tables and the strategy conversations in the castle more. However, I loved the missions in our show because they all had an element of strategy involved in them, whether that was fighting to get a shield or marking somebody and trying not to be guessed that you've marked them, or you know, getting people down from cages. There was always a way that you could think about the game, about the mission in terms of the wider game. So I love that. And they all had quite a creepy, sinister undertone as well, like with the clowns or with the marking ceremony. And I thought it was really entertaining. So yeah, I really enjoyed the missions.
And what I went on with you is about your book as well, Go Neuro Way. So can you tell me about the book?
I've always loved traveling. It's always been a really important part of my life. I studied foreign languages at university, so I spent time living out in Asia and Europe during my course. After uni, did a lot of travel as well. And after COVID, my partner and I were in Cambodia. We did 3 weeks in Cambodia. And I noticed when I was there that there were lots of elements of the trip that I found very easy. And then there were lots of trip elements that I found extremely difficult as well. So I just started making little lists on my phone for the things I found easy and hard. And when I got back, I started thinking about all of the other trips that I'd had before that. And I thought, you know what? I could probably compile a list of tips and suggestions for other people who are autistic or neuro to help them with their own travels. So I started thinking about all of my different holidays and just went through each of them and made some tips, made some suggestions. And that process took about a couple of months. And then I that materialized into me writing a full book about those tips. And the writing of the book took about a year. And then editing it, publishing it, and getting it online. Again, that took a little bit of time as well. But yeah, last year I was able to self-publish the book, and I've had a lot of really nice feedback from people who've said that it really resonated with them.
And was the things that you thought that that would be good for creating a book of tips for helping people who are neurodivergent with travel? What were the things that could be your highlight as certain things that might neurodivergent people or certain things like yourself might have found challenging, and certain things that you might have thought could be helpful solutions and things that could make it easier for other neurodivergent people?
I think because I started to think about what are the ways in which I can make this trip easier in future. And across all of my trips, I've probably put in place little adjustments here and there to make situations better. And it's been a bit of a test and learn process, but I feel like my trips now are much more catered to the person that I am compared to in the past when I might have done things that weren't always helpful for my way of traveling. So it all just came together, and I just thought, you know what, I'd really like to share these tips for, like you say, other people. Noise, like I say, is absolutely a big thing for me. Some of the obvious tips are noise cancelling headphones, earplugs, but then also choosing certain types of holidays away and also avoiding certain types of situations. For example, I think in the past, beach holidays have always been seen as a really relaxing type of travel that you can do. But I've always found that a lot of people have that mentality, so are drawn to that type of experience, which then means there's more people trying to enjoy this relaxing atmosphere. So it doesn't always play out because the more people that there are, the more bars that there's going to be, more restaurants, the more music that there's going, and the more crowds that there will be. So for me, like a beach holiday or a pool holiday, for example, has to be a very specific type of resort or place for me to be able to enjoy it fully. Otherwise, it's usually too noisy for me. Comparing that, if you were to get away to the countryside or do a hike, I found those types of holidays really helpful for me because I can just block out all distractions and noise, and it does allow me to fully recalibrate.
Yeah, that seems like a good helpful resource for neurodivergent people, because For myself, it can be quite a struggle and challenge with the idea of travelling. It's something that obviously does need to be made more accessible and inclusive for neurodivergent people, and I guess for having somebody like yourself who is more able to cope with the challenges of travelling and find means of adapting, and it can help a lot of people who might not have that ability to think, to come up with the solutions or find challenges in ways that you might find things not as difficult, if you get what I mean.
And I think another thing for me, another hallmark of my autism is taking things extremely literally. So in the past, I've not always been the most flexible for when things go wrong on holiday. So in a couple of the chapters, I try and lay out a couple of situations in which things will probably go wrong and which you will need to have some contingency, because I just wouldn't have thought of those in the past, because I think, okay, the bus has said that it's going to arrive at this time, it will arrive at this time, and obviously that's not always the case. Or if you're in a particular country, I've made the mistake of thinking, okay, I'll be able to use my debit card wherever I am, because I just think the 2025, it's accessible everywhere, but that's not always the case, particularly in smaller rural places. So it's just about having those contingencies to avoid getting stressed or getting or feeling too overwhelmed when you're traveling, because you're supposed to enjoy it for the most part.
That is quite good to think of certain like things could go wrong, because it's that thing, as you're saying, that I think it's probably the most important advice in the book you can give, really, because it's that thing that, yes, even if a person does go on holiday and take some of those adaptations you recommended, but there's that thing that it's always the things that go wrong that, triggers like meltdowns or panic attacks, really, and sensory overloads, especially, as I said, of being able to navigate when countries have different rules and laws around certain things that people might need to know when they're on holiday, and navigating also the different communities out nowhere now to be able to then communicate in that space and of what the information is. And yeah, it's good just to have off the different things you need to be aware of.
Absolutely, about making yourself as prepared as possible, but also leaving yourself open for different experiences when you're traveling, I think is really important.
Do you ever intend to another book?
I'm not sure, to be honest. Possibly in future, I maybe think I would like to write something related to work or careers and how to navigate your neurodivergent traits, maybe in those types of situations, but nothing planned as of yet, but we'll see.
After the show was finished, how have you found that from the impact of the show since the show has finished?
Whenever I've gone out in public, I've been in disguise. I've just worn a hat and glasses and just made sure that I to try and not be recognized, because I think I would find that a little bit strange to be fully recognized in public. It's not really happened too much yet, which is nice. But to be honest, I think it's not really impacted my life in too big of a way, because I only wanted to play the game and just have it be its own compartmentalized experience. And it's quite nice now getting back to a bit of a routine, because it was very exciting, but it was also a little bit hectic at times as well in January when the show was airing. But it's really nice now to just surround myself with the people close to me and just seeing what's next in our lives.
I can imagine how hectic it was, and this is part of the promotion of it. But what was it like also doing some of the other TV, radio, media appearances?
It was really fun. Yeah, I wanted to make the most of this whole experience and get involved in whatever I could. They were all great. It was really nice being able to talk about my game and just get my opinion across, speak about things that came up in the show that are really important to me. I've enjoyed the whole thing.
What things have you found yourself going on speaking about this, and also going on and talking about your experience being autistic? And so where have you found yourself discussing that in public, and what has also been like the kind of impact of having these conversations in the public sphere?
Been nice, and I'm very aware that I'm only talking about my own experiences. Yeah,
Yeah.
the neurodivergent individuals all have completely different experiences, whether they're autistic or have ADHD or whatever else. So I always want to preface it by saying this is my experience and this is how it all shows up for me and how it showed up in my game. But that's not to say that it would be the same situation at all for anybody else because we all face against the different challenges.
As I said earlier on about giving advice for other people who may be thinking either playing on reality, what general advice would you have for anybody who might be considering that while also new?
I would say go for it. Why not? You only get one life to live, so just do it. It could open some incredible doors for you, and you will learn a hell of a lot about yourself as well. So I would tell people to not be scared. It's a really nice, supportive group that look after you when you're on the show. So yeah, just go for it.
Realities, TVs is like a bit focus interest for yourself. Have you, from all the different reality shows you watched, have you seen other autistic and neurodivergent people on those reality shows?
I think I've seen a handful of people with autism on different shows. Not too many though, but it's really nice that it's getting more focus in the time that we live in, because not talking about those reality TV shows, but for years and years in the media, autism was quite misrepresented, I would say, and quite stereotypical at times. So it's really nice now that people's understanding is evolving and you're seeing a range of people with lots of different experiences.
What was it like meeting Claudia Winkleman on the TV show?
Claudia's lovely. She's so down to earth. She's so genuine. And she really cares about the game as well, which is nice. She's so fully invested in what happens. And you can see that she is feeling the excitement as a fan. So I really like Claudia.
One of the main things you really enjoyed about the show, maybe just highlight throughout the series.
My favourite moments were in the missions, 100%. I loved the train mission. I loved the cages mission. Thought the marking mission was fantastic. Obviously, the boat mission. They were all so much fun, and I wasn't expecting to enjoy them at all before the show, but I really did. I would say the missions were my favourite thing.
Did you have a favourite mission?
Ooh, I think the boat was my favourite mission. Controversial, but I loved it.
One last question I tend to ask people on this podcast. If there's one thing that you wish to see from neurodivergent people, or one thing would you like to change to make things better?
There's so many real world issues when it comes to neurodivergent people that you just want to see those situations get better. We've seen a lot of things in the news about the treatment of neurodivergent people in situations where they should be receiving better care. So that's been really hard to see, and I would love for that situation to improve because obviously a lot of people are in really unfortunate places. But for a more general stance, I would say, yeah, just keep amplifying neurodivergent voices to talk about the range of experiences that they have and to get people to understand more about where they're coming from, because like I say, there's been a lot of stereotypical and outdated information out there about all of us for years and years, and it's really important that we challenge that so that we can just build a more inclusive world where we're all encouraged and able to be our best.
Do you want to tell people they can follow you or buy your book and get a copy of that?
So the book is available on Amazon in paperback, hardback, and Kindle versions. Also behind that, there's a website that I have called GoNeuroWay.com. So that gives details about the book and the process that I went through to get that published. I'm on Instagram. I do a few weird dancing videos on TikTok if anybody's got any interest in that at all. And yeah, no, happy to connect with more people in the community.
And thank you again for Dan from coming on the podcast. Also want to thank Plank PR, who are the PR team behind the Traitors, dealing with any press and media. If you want to find Dan on social media, you can follow him on Instagram with the handle DJZB10. So that's DJBZ on DJZB100. And as I said at the beginning of the podcast, if you look into the synopsis of this episode, the description underneath the episode where you can find out all the where you'll be able to find out all the information about this episode. So as well, you will be able to find out where you can buy Dan's book from whichever bookstore or audiobook platform you may wish to listen or read his book. And also want to say, please, if you like this episode, give this a positive review on your podcast listening platforms or wherever you find this episode. And please do share this podcast interview and this podcast so on social media, and tell people to tune in and subscribe to this podcast via the Neuro Rainbow Cast with Autistically Our podcast feed, again, which you'll be able to subscribe to on any podcasting platforms, and please consider that with the sister podcasts, this elect ability, so that's DISELECTABILBY, so that just bringing the words this elect ability into one singular word for that. And you would be able to also subscribe to Pacifying as well, another podcast from the Neuro Rainbow Project that I host, as said, where you can follow Dan on social media. So that's, again, if I didn't say that clearly enough, DJZB100, and that's on Instagram. But also, if you want to follow the Neuro Rainbow Project, most active now Instagram, yes, still there at Neuro Rainbow Project on Instagram, no longer available on Facebook. And you'll be able to also follow our on Blue Sky at neurorainbowproject.com. You also can find the Neuro Rainbow Project on YouTube, where you can watch most of the podcast episodes, as well as finding sorted clips at Neuro Rainbow Project on YouTube. Also, please consider subscribe to the brand new Patreon channel, which is the Rainbow Pacifier. Links in the description of the episode of where you can subscribe to the Patreon channel, as well as if you wish to just make a run of donation to the podcast, there'll be a link to where you can do so on a Ko-fi link of where you can donate to the podcast via that. Also, if you want to get in touch with the podcast, send any feedback, responses, comments to what you heard on this episode, or any ideas and responses to any of the episodes on this podcast feed, and just general any responses, email at neurorainbowproject.com with more information of how you get in touch via the website neurorainbowproject.com, which details again will be in the description of this episode. Thank you again for listening. Bye for now.